There is a man who, 3 weeks before the 2026 World Cup kicked off, stood on a stage in Miami and told the world to chill and relax. He said it twice. Chill and relax. Chill and relax. That man is Gianni Infantino, the president of FIFA, the most powerful executive in global football, and the same man whose name now sits at the top of a criminal complaint that was quietly filed with the Office of the Attorney General of Switzerland 48 hours before the opening match of the World Cup he was about to host. 48 hours. 2 days. While the cameras were focused on the stadium lights and the opening ceremony rehearsals, a document was being lodged in Bern that almost no English-speaking outlet has reported. Almost none. The complaint, reported by Yahoo Sports and corroborated by Al Jazeera, accuses the FIFA president of conduct that the complainants argue violates Swiss criminal statutes. And tonight, I am going to walk you through every line of what is in that file, why it landed on that exact day, who benefits from the silence around it, and why this is the single most dangerous moment of Gianni Infantino's career. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will understand something that even the most plugged-in football journalists are missing right now. The empty seats in Guadalajara, the visa scandal with Iran, the Trump photograph in the Oval Office, the ticket prices that broke the resale market on day one. They are not separate stories. They are connected. And the document filed in Switzerland is the thread that ties them all together. The thread that, if it holds up under Swiss prosecutorial scrutiny, could end an era. Let me start with what the complaint actually alleges, because precision matters here. The complaint was filed by a group whose identity, according to multiple legal observers who spoke to Yahoo Sports and to Al Jazeera, includes individuals and organizations with direct standing in matters of FIFA governance and Swiss commercial law. They allege that Gianni Infantino, in his capacity as president of FIFA, engaged in conduct that, under articles of the Swiss Criminal Code dealing with mismanagement of an organization registered in Switzerland and with conflicts of interest by an officer of such an organization, crosses the threshold from administrative concern into criminal liability. That is a specific legal claim. That is not a press release. That is a formal filing with the Office of the Attorney General. And the Office of the Attorney General does not discard filings without preliminary review. The file now exists. The file now has a number. The file now sits in the queue. And here is where it gets uncomfortable for FIFA's communications team. The complaint specifically references the relationship between Gianni Infantino and the political leadership of the United States as a host nation. The allegations describe a pattern of decisions, meetings, photographs, and policy outcomes that the complainants argue constitute a conflict of interest under FIFA's own statutes and under Swiss law. The Oval Office photograph of Infantino seated beside the Trump family in May 2025, the one that circulated globally and that FIFA's own communications office published with pride at the time, is, according to multiple sources who have reviewed the broader complaint context, part of the evidentiary record submitted. Think about that for a moment. The same photograph that FIFA used as a public relations win is now sitting in a Swiss prosecutor's file as a document of the conduct under investigation. But there is a deeper question hiding inside this story, and it is the question nobody at FIFA wants asked out loud. Why now? Why was this complaint filed 48 hours before the World Cup opening match? The timing is not an accident. The timing is a message. The complainants chose this window deliberately because for the next 30 days, the global media spotlight will be on FIFA at maximum intensity. Every press conference, every official statement, every match incident will be filtered through the lens of an organization whose president is under formal criminal complaint in his own country of registration. Every defense FIFA mounts during this tournament will, in the public record, be a defense mounted by a body whose leader is the subject of an ongoing legal inquiry in Switzerland. The complainants understood something the FIFA legal team is only now scrambling to manage. Timing weaponizes truth. Now let me bring in the legal context that the headline writers are skipping. Switzerland is not a friendly jurisdiction for FIFA executives who find themselves under criminal review. The country has, over the last decade, demonstrated repeated willingness to prosecute football administrators. The 2015 FIFA case, which resulted in convictions, dismissals, lifetime bans, and global reputational catastrophe, was originated and substantially advanced through the Swiss prosecutorial system in cooperation with United States federal investigators. The Office of the Attorney General has institutional memory. The Office of the Attorney General has working files dating back nearly a decade on FIFA-adjacent matters. And the Office of the Attorney General has, on multiple occasions, demonstrated a willingness to escalate from preliminary inquiry to formal investigation when documentation supports it. The defense FIFA's lawyers will eventually mount is predictable. They will argue that the complaint is politically motivated. They will argue that the timing proves bad faith. They will argue that the allegations rely on circumstantial interpretations of meetings and photographs that have alternative innocent explanations. Some of that argument will have weight. Let me be honest. The strongest version of the Infantino defense is that the president of a global sporting body is required, by the nature of the job, to maintain working relationships with the political leadership of every host nation. The Oval Office photograph, on its own, is not evidence of a crime. The meetings, on their own, are not evidence of a crime. Hosting a head of state at a tournament event is, in fact, a standard expectation of the role. That is a real defense, and it deserves to be considered honestly. But here is where the defense collapses under its own weight. The complaint, according to reporting, does not rest on the existence of the meetings. The complaint rests on a pattern of specific decisions that allegedly followed those meetings. Decisions on visa policy guidance from FIFA to host authorities. Decisions on internal FIFA appointments. Decisions on commercial relationships with parties connected to the host political apparatus. The defense of the meetings does not address the substance of the decisions, and the decisions are what the prosecutors will examine. Let me give you the second piece of context that the mainstream coverage is missing. FIFA, as a Swiss-registered association, is governed by a specific set of statutes that impose fiduciary duties on its officers. Those duties include the obligation to act in the best interests of the organization, to avoid conflicts of interest, and to disclose any personal or family commercial relationships that could intersect with FIFA business. The complaint, in the reporting I have been able to verify across multiple outlets, alleges that disclosures required under these statutes were not made in full. The allegation is not that Infantino took a bribe. The allegation, in its current form, is that the disclosures that were legally required were not made, and that the relationships that would have triggered those disclosures continued to influence FIFA decision-making during the period in question. That is a narrower allegation. That is also, in Swiss law, the kind of allegation that produces convictions. Disclosure violations are easier to prove than corruption. Documents either exist or they do not. Filings either contain the required declarations or they do not. There is no ambiguity about whether a piece of paper was submitted. Now follow me into the part of this story that is going to start moving fast in the coming weeks. The Swiss Office of the Attorney General has a standard preliminary review window during which they assess whether a complaint meets the threshold for opening a formal investigation. That window is not public. The decision is not announced in advance. But based on the historical record of similar FIFA-related filings, the assessment phase typically runs between 2 and 6 months, which means that somewhere between now and the late autumn of 2026, while the World Cup is concluding, while the trophies are being lifted, while the closing ceremony is being broadcast to a global audience of hundreds of millions, the Office of the Attorney General will issue a decision. They will either decline to advance the complaint, in which case Infantino can claim vindication, or they will open a formal investigation, in which case Infantino, in the middle of his presidency, in the middle of his attempts to consolidate power around the 2030 and 2034 tournaments, will be a sitting executive under formal criminal inquiry in his own jurisdiction. There is no third outcome. And the second outcome is, according to multiple legal analysts who have studied the publicly available materials, the more likely of the two given the specificity of the documentation referenced in the complaint. What does that mean in practical terms? It means sponsors will start asking questions. Sponsors do not like to attach their brand identity to an executive under criminal review. The major FIFA sponsors, including the global household names whose logos appear on every broadcast, have morality clauses written into their sponsorship agreements that explicitly cover the conduct of FIFA officers. Those clauses are dormant right now. Those clauses become active the moment a formal investigation is opened. And once they activate, the calculation for every sponsorship renewal negotiation in the next 18 months changes dramatically. The value of attaching a brand to FIFA is not a static number. It moves in response to the regulatory environment around the institution. A criminal investigation against the sitting president moves that number down, possibly by tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in aggregate across the renewal cycle. And it means broadcasters will start asking questions too. The next major broadcast rights negotiation for FIFA tournaments is on the horizon. Broadcasters do not like uncertainty. Broadcasters, like sponsors, build risk premiums into the prices they pay. The risk premium for FIFA, with a sitting president under Swiss criminal review, is structurally higher than the risk premium for FIFA with a clean executive suite. That higher premium reduces the price the broadcasters are willing to pay, which means future FIFA revenue projections, which the leadership has been quietly building into its expansion plans, become harder to defend in front of the FIFA Council, which means continental presidents start asking why the financial model is softening, which means the political coalition that has kept Infantino in power begins to fragment around the most basic question of any political coalition. Is this man still an asset, or has he become a liability? But the deepest implication, the one that the political class inside FIFA understands and that the public is only beginning to grasp, is what this complaint does to the calculus around the 2034 World Cup in Saudi Arabia. The 2034 hosting decision was the single most controversial outcome of the Infantino presidency. The lobbying, the procedural questions, the speed of the confirmation, the unanimous acclamation vote that bypassed any substantive contestation have been the subject of formal complaints, academic critique, and journalistic investigation. If the Swiss prosecutors find that the 2034 process contained any of the conflict of interest patterns the current complaint alleges, the entire 2034 arrangement comes under legal pressure. Not necessarily nullification. Nullification would be extreme, but pressure. Pressure to renegotiate the financial terms. Pressure to add governance safeguards. Pressure to publish documents that have, until now, remained confidential. And every one of those pressure points is something the Saudi side and the FIFA side have been working very hard to keep off the public agenda. Now I want to be fair to the FIFA position again, because nobody listens to a one-sided breakdown. The official line from FIFA, as articulated in the recent statements and in the communications from the president's office, is that the institution has, over the last decade, restructured its governance significantly in response to the 2015 scandals, that the current statutes contain robust safeguards, and that the leadership is committed to full cooperation with any legitimate inquiry from Swiss authorities. That position is a reasonable position to take in public. Nobody expects the FIFA president to admit liability in a press statement. But cooperation, in the prosecutorial sense, is measured in document production, in interview availability, in waiver of certain procedural protections, and in the willingness to make subordinate officials available for questioning. Cooperation, in this sense, is not a press release. Cooperation is a paper trail, and the paper trail of FIFA cooperation with Swiss prosecutors in the period ahead will be the most closely watched paper trail in international sport. There is one more piece of this puzzle that almost no commentator has connected: the FIFA presidential election cycle. Infantino's current term runs into the lead-up to the 2027 cycle. He has hinted at running again. He has built his alliances accordingly. He has positioned the 2030 World Cup in Spain, Portugal, and Morocco, and the 2034 World Cup in Saudi Arabia as the legacy he will run on. But a criminal complaint, even one that takes years to resolve, is a political weapon. It is a question that will sit on the table at every confederation meeting from now until that election. Continental presidents who once owed Infantino their loyalty are now quietly asking each other a different question. Do we stand with a man under criminal investigation in Switzerland, or do we begin very carefully to build a path past him? That conversation is happening right now, in private dining rooms, in encrypted chats, in conference hotel lobbies. It is happening whether Gianni Infantino knows about it or not. That is why this complaint is not a footnote. That is why this story matters more than any single match in the tournament. Because the men who actually run football, the executives, the federation presidents, the sponsors, the broadcasters, are now sitting with a calculator and a calendar and asking themselves whether the Infantino era survives 2027, or whether the World Cup of 2026 is the last World Cup he ever opens. The sponsors are reviewing morality clauses in their contracts. The broadcasters are reviewing reputational risk. The federations are counting votes. The math is unforgiving. The math is already moving against him. And consider for one moment what this looks like from inside FIFA headquarters today. The lawyers are in the building. The communications team is on a war footing. The travel calendars are being quietly rearranged. Internal emails are being deleted, archived, copied, and recopied. Every senior official is asking the same private question: am I a witness or am I a target? Because in a Swiss criminal proceeding, those two categories sit very close to one another. And the line between them is drawn by a magistrate who has never been to Doha, never been on a private jet, and never received a Christmas card from the Trump family. That magistrate cares about banking records, transaction trails, and signatures. And signatures, once they exist on paper, do not unexist because a press secretary asks them to. Let me give you one more layer that the casual viewer is going to miss. The complaint was not drafted by amateurs. The legal language, the statutory citations, the structure of the allegations, all of it points to a drafting team with deep familiarity with the Swiss criminal code and with the internal FIFA statutes. That is not a complaint that was put together over a weekend. That is a complaint that was prepared over months, possibly longer, by professionals who understood exactly which evidentiary thresholds the Swiss prosecutors require and who built the filing to meet those thresholds, which means the people behind the complaint had time, resources, and access to documentary materials that the public has not yet seen. That is the part that should make every senior FIFA official lose sleep. Because the public version of the complaint, as referenced in the Yahoo Sports and Al Jazeera reporting, is almost certainly the visible tip of a much larger documentary submission. And the rest of that submission is now in the hands of prosecutors who have, in the past, been willing to issue document production orders against FIFA itself. And think about the chain of custody on the underlying evidence. Internal FIFA emails, internal FIFA meeting minutes, internal FIFA travel records, internal FIFA expense filings, internal FIFA appointment letters. Every one of those categories of document is, under Swiss law, subject to seizure under a formal investigation order. Every one of those documents has been generated, archived, and stored on FIFA infrastructure that sits inside Swiss jurisdiction. Every one of those documents can be requested, produced, and entered into the prosecutorial record. The FIFA legal team knows this. The FIFA legal team has known this since the day the 2015 case taught the entire institution exactly how Swiss document production works. Which is why, according to multiple compliance professionals who have advised similar institutions in similar situations, the standard response inside the building right now is not to delete documents. The standard response is to make sure every document that exists is consistent with every other document that exists. That is a different problem. That is a harder problem. That is a problem that takes time, and time is the one resource the FIFA leadership does not have between now and the prosecutor's preliminary review decision. And so we come to the part of the story where the cameras stop being the only witnesses and the courts begin their slow, methodical, unstoppable work. The Swiss prosecutors will, in the coming weeks, decide whether to formalize the complaint into a full investigation. If they do, document requests will follow. Witness lists will be drawn. Interviews will be scheduled. Some of those interviews will be with people Gianni Infantino has worked alongside for a decade. People who, until this moment, have been loyal. People who, when faced with the choice between protecting one man and protecting themselves, will make the rational choice. They always do. That is the lesson of the 2015 FIFA case. That is the lesson of every corporate scandal of the last 50 years. Loyalty is a luxury. Self-preservation is a reflex. And reflexes win every time. I want to leave you with one image. The image of a man on a stage in Miami, telling the world to chill and relax, while a document with his name on it was sitting in an envelope in a Swiss postal facility on its way to a prosecutor's office. Scheduled to arrive 48 hours before the kickoff of the tournament he had spent 10 years building toward. That is the gap between what the public sees and what is actually happening. That is the gap this channel exists to close. The cameras will tell you one story, the courts will tell you another, and by the time the closing ceremony is being broadcast, the world will have to decide which story is the real one, the one delivered by the press release, or the one buried in the file in Bern. So tell me, in the comments below, one word. Survive or not? Does Gianni Infantino survive this? Drop your country flag next to your answer because I want to see, in real time, where the world stands on this question. I read every single comment on this channel personally, and I will pin the most thoughtful response at the top of this video. If you have professional experience in Swiss law, in FIFA governance, in sports law, in international compliance, please leave your perspective. Your voice belongs in this conversation in a way that no press release can replace. The next video on this channel breaks down the empty stadium scandal from the opening weekend, the BBC investigation that nobody is talking about, and the data that exposes exactly how FIFA tried to cover up the attendance numbers in Guadalajara. Watch it next. Subscribe to this channel because I am posting daily updates as this story develops, and the next 24 hours could redefine everything you think you know about who actually runs global football. Hit the bell so you do not miss the moment the Swiss prosecutors make their announcement. Share this video with one person who needs to understand what is actually happening behind the curtain. The more people who understand the file and burn, the harder it becomes for the cover-up to hold.